Excited to welcome you to this week's This Lyric, That Truth episode with Chris and Alisa Grace.
Hey,
And
Ceci.
I am so excited to get to meet you guys. First of all, you put on a marriage getaway that we have heard such amazing feedback about called the Weekend to Remember Marriage Getaway. And so I would love you guys to start out by introducing yourselves and how you met, and then we'll roll into talking about how you two got a passion for investing in marriages across the country. And we'll also even kind of tie in the Thank God I Do song by Lauren Daigle. So, Chris and Alisa, you've been married, is it 35 years?
Yeah,
37.
almost 37. Yeah.
Yeah, 37.
That's
It's hard to believe.
that's wonderful.
Feels like for
Congratulations.
old people, not us.
Doesn't it feel that way?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're my husband and I are coming on 25 years this summer. And I'm like, when did that happen?
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
a
you.
big milestone.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's been a long time when a student comes up to you in class and says, Dr. Grace, my dad had you in class. And then I'm waiting for the day a kid comes up and says, Dr. Grace, my grandpa had you in class. And I tell you, if you want an F, just continue going along this line.
Do you know
But
what
no, it's
I was
exciting.
actually thinking how lucky people are at Biola University to have the opportunity to take your class and I mean right out of the gate get such great information. Talk to me about being a professor.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome. Lisa and I been together for 37 years, and for 36 of that, we've been both professors and working at Biola University, a Christian university in Los Angeles, Orange County area. And it's been awesome because hanging around with 18 to 21 year olds just kind of keeps you young and you realize your vocabulary goes out of style every 3 4 years and you say jokes and they have no idea what you're talking about. So you really have to keep things kind of update and fresh and learn the new things. But when it comes to marriages and relationships, which we get to talk about, a lot of it is so timeless and so based on truth that it still resonates. And so we have students who just crave to hear more, regardless of how old or how long you've been married. In fact, sometimes that's an advantage, right? To be married for a little while. They're like, okay, you've been there in the trenches. Does it get any better? Or is it as good as they say? Or is there any hope for us? So we love being around that population and talking about things like marriage and relationships with them. Yeah.
I think
So
one of the really cool things about it, Cece, is that they're on the front end of life. And if we
yep.
can really help them lay a good, solid foundation in their relationship with Christ, give them some tools that can help them with their communication, managing conflict, forgiveness, gratitude, the grace of God at work in you and through you to another person, whether it's marriage or dating or a roommate or parenting. It just could save these people a lifetime of heartache and start making generational change on the front end of life. And
Yeah.
that's what we get so excited about.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because you get to teach people, like you were saying, on the front end of life. Most often these kids are not married, but heading into that in their future. And then you also get to speak into marriages that are already existing, and in the middle kind of thing. And so you really see this thing all the way through. Tell me quickly how you two met. What's your front end of marriage story?
Yeah, ours is something we tell our kids to never do, and that is to go the way we did, which, what we did is we were complete strangers. Lisa crashed a wedding, and she was from Texas, and
Oh,
she,
Lisa.
I know,
A good Texas girl, you would never suspect.
drove all the way up from Texas with a girlfriend and wasn't invited. And I happened to be at a friend's wedding, and we all had nameplates, and it was very formal, except for her. She wrote her name, with a piece of pencil and put it in front of her, and only her first name. And we talked 10 minutes at our table, and I was smitten already.
It was really cool because the bride's mom had this really great idea to seat all the single people at the same dinner table.
So smart.
So it was my friend Christy and me at a table with 6 single Christian guys. So we were having a ball, but he was one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was known as the wedding crasher. We all only knew her name as Alisa, and this was before you could legally stalk people, right? Back then, you couldn't go on Google and you couldn't
The
do
good old
anything.
days.
So I left that night knowing, about three things. I knew that she loved Jesus. I could tell by the way she talked about him. I knew that she was from Texas, and I knew her name was Alisa. And so the next week, I'm just, kind of brainstorming with my buddies, like, who was that girl? How do I get a hold of her? What would be what can I do? I just know she's from Texas. I'll never see her again. But I decided, well, I'll call the mother of the bride the next week. And the mother of the bride said, sorry, Chris, I don't really know you that well, but all that to say, I don't know who this girl was. She crashed our wedding. And she said, if you want, you could call my daughter who just got married. She's moved to Japan after her honeymoon. So I had to call Japan in the 1980s, and it
You
cost
were
like,
smitten.
yeah, it cost me like $6,000 every 10 minutes to call Japan. And the bride says, I don't know who that girl was. She crashed our wedding. And she goes, here's my new husband. And he gets on the phone and says, I don't know who that girl was, but I do know a girl that goes to Texas Tech. Here's her dorm number and her name, her dorm room. So I wrote to this girl named Christy at a school in Texas Tech University.
Yeah.
And I said, give this to some wedding crasher named Alisa. And that is how we met. She gets a letter in the mail one day from me.
Yeah, you talk about a God story. My friend that I went to the wedding with, she was from Japan also. And that's how she knew the groom. It was the end of the spring semester, and she was going home for the summer. And I was taking her to the airport. And she said, hey, do you mind if I just stop by the dorm? Let me make sure I got everything. And so we did that. And she said, you know what? Let me check my mailbox one more time. And there was that letter from Chris sitting in that mailbox. She pulls it out. It's a little envelope addressed to Alisa, no last name, in care of Christy Childers. And she pulled it out and she's like, it's for you. I'm thinking, who would write me in care of you? This is my hometown and you're from Japan. And so that kind of started the whole thing. That was at the end of April, beginning of May. We were engaged by January and we got married the following June.
Yeah, we never lived in the same state until the day we were married. I didn't even know her last name until she walked down the aisle. And I'm like, oh, it's Alisa Barkley. But honestly, we were long distance. We had prayer and writing letters. We've kept all those letters. And it really was something special that God had placed on our hearts. And we were just kind of ready for it. And again, we told our kids, you will get to know the person and their last name before you start thinking about something serious. But, so what that meant was our marriage was really a time of fun and excitement and joy, getting to know each other. But it took a little bit of time to adapt. We were very well, complemented as far as our personalities and everything. So, and our love for Jesus. But
we had some growing pains.
Yeah, we had to work out how to do life together. So.
I think everybody has growing pains. You grow up in different households. You've got different perspectives on things. I remember my first fight with my husband, who our audience will know really well, was about the appropriate way to make mac and cheese. And I was like, you follow the directions. And he's like, no, you add a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I'm like, I'm not eating your mac and cheese.
I'm with you, Ceci. That's us too. Exactly.
Yep. You have those first fights and adjustments, don't you? And some people are rule followers. And some people don't really care. And I think your husband sounds like, no, that doesn't apply to me. So, I think we all have those adjustments, don't we?
So how long were you married until God put a passion in your life to teach about marriage? I know you're both, at the professor level at Biola, we mentioned before, and then to put on these seminars and things like that. What happened in the middle there of the story?
Yeah, it's funny. You go to university as a new professor. We'd been married 1 year. And all of a sudden, the students look at you as experienced, or even more scary, they look at you as the expert. And so by the second and third year, they were asking us to speak on marriage at at the university and other places, and dating and marriage, and we realized, okay, all right, we got this. It'll take us a little bit of time to come up with something, but we could talk about experience. Well, pretty soon, we realized, oh my goodness, this is easy to come up with the theory. It's easy to come up with the idea. It's easy to say what makes a relationship thrive and a marriage work. And we even know the vows, right? In sickness and in health, and in good times and bad. I mean, we can come up with all kinds of great things, but living it out really began to focus us on our deficits, the areas of growth. And we were kind of striving rather than thriving, even though we were being asked. And so I think it was a blessing in disguise, because it forced us to kind of come to terms with, man, different personality styles and different ways that God had given us temperaments. And I think it allowed us to start working it out, but kind of in front of people too, which was a little bit scary, right?
Some real-time growth. So as we're really studying these principles in order to teach them and come up with examples and stories, we're starting to realize, wow, this is something I'm not doing. This is something I'm not really being an active listener. I usually notice I get really defensive. I get really passive aggressive when my buttons get pushed. Where's that coming from? And learning to invite the Lord into that space and say, Lord, why is this pushing my button? What's in me that you need to grow, that you want to bring some healing to some kind of woundedness I have? And then because we're teaching it, we're actually applying it, and not just have it be words, but actually living out the concepts, the principles, the skills. And it saved our marriage. It really did. It saved our marriage.
And so, Ceci, I think what changed, if you had to ask from those first couple of, we were in love. It was awesome. Love carried us those first couple of years, no problem. That first kid popped out and life took a U-turn, man. It's like, what? This is not easy, or what I signed up for. You know what it was that we fell back on 2 years after we were married? Somebody called and said, hey, we think you need to go and check out this conference. And it was a Family Life Weekend to Remember conference in 1990. And we had been married for 2 years. It was 89, 90. And we went to a Family Life Weekend to Remember getaway. And what we did is we took a lot of notes. We wrote down a lot of things, but a few years later, we pulled that book out. And that's really what started our conversations of going, okay, we can do this and work through it. But we have to protect others from having to go through these ups and downs if we can ever be a part of that.
Yeah. So we're not the only ones that are living like this. We need to help other people, and so that we can help save the heartache, maybe. And it made all the difference in the world for us.
Is that, I haven't had the privilege of going to a Weekend to Remember conference. I have had several friends that have gone, and the feedback is just phenomenal, and how it invests in marriages and the turnaround that they experience. And so I can't speak from it from a personal perspective, but just great feedback from friends and things. Is it a seminar about communication, and is there still a workbook that's a part of it? Walk me through a little bit about some of what you talk through on these weekends.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's you come, and in a group of people, you share your deepest wounds and pains with people publicly. And what that does is it forces you to immediately confront all of your
serious. That is not
weaknesses.
true.
I was like, what?
I told you, Ceci, take it with a grain of salt.
In a public setting. So, Ceci, we need to get you there so your listeners can go, wait a minute, I want to hear this from Ceci.
You want to bear your soul.
I hear her side of it all the time. I want to hear the husband's side of it. No,
Okay, Dr. Chris, how does it really work then?
yeah. You, you know what it does? The way it works is, yeah, man, things like communication are on there, things like conflict, right? The way in which, but the topics that really draw people in, I think, those are things we all deal with.
Yeah.
But I think what family life does that's so different at these getaways, Lisa, is I think it starts with this notion that all of us come into marriage expecting this idea of oneness, right? I mean, all
A
of us
dream.
kind of came in with a dream, and that dream was, oh my gosh, it's going to be awesome. I have my best friend. I have the person I'm going to share the rest of my life with. It's going to be, we're on the same page.
We both love the Lord, so we're Christians, so it's all going to work out.
Yeah.
No problems.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you realize you're married to someone that, well, is awesome, but they kind of leave the cabinets open all the time and they never take the trash out. And then all of a sudden you're like,
I
and,
resemble that remark, Chris. Come on. I'm a messy married to a cleanie, and that's probably our biggest conflict.
yeah, yeah, ours is the reverse of that. But
Yeah.
but then you realize, and you start to realize, wait a minute, something happened to this idea
Mm.
of being one, of being a unified team, and we're going to attack the world. And it's that sometimes slow dawning, slow burn, and sometimes it's that almost immediate, uh-oh, did I make a mistake? What's going on here, right? Like, this is messed up. And I think what we have decided is at a conference like that is we want other couples to know, yeah, that dream of oneness is one thing, but that drift towards isolation is common
Yeah.
for everybody.
And it's so natural. I mean,
Mhm.
you have to work and be very intentional to build a really solid, successful, Christ-centered marriage because it doesn't just happen. So when you look around and you see people with really solid, great marriages, that didn't just happen because all too easily we just naturally drift towards isolation because at our heart we're sinful people. This side of heaven, we're going to be selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, unforgiving, just self-focused because that's the nature of the flesh, isn't it? That's what we all battle this side of heaven. And so one thing that this getaway does is it gives you a chance to really have some conversations about how do we communicate? What were our dreams for marriage? What were your dreams for marriage, Chris? Here's what my dreams were. And then how did that dream fall apart? How did the wheels come off the wagon?
Yeah.
And we talk about the influence of anger, of sin, of spiritual attack, of the influence of culture and the world around us. And we talk about communication. How do we manage our conflict in a way that we don't see it as a problem to fix, but it's actually an opportunity for growth. And then we talk about sex. We talk sexual intimacy.
That's an awkward one for some people to get up there and talk about sex. But the good news is at a conference like this, you are not with 700 other people in Grand Rapids or Chicago or Kalamazoo. You are with one person in a ballroom, and we make it that in such a place that this is about you two. This isn't about sharing with other people. This isn't about airing your grievances. This isn't about pointing the finger. We tell each person that walks in, draw a circle around you
yourself,
and you stay in that circle. You don't be elbowing the person next to you, your spouse, saying, you need to fix it. This is going to be about what you need to fix and work on. And it's done in this great way. So I would say, cool, I think, Ceci, you guys need to come. We're going to get you to one of these conferences. You're going to bring your producer, Abby. She's going to come to one of these so that she can now verify your stories and all the other things that you tell your wonderful listeners. Because, Abby, it took work, didn't it, to get where you're at? 25 years takes some time and effort, doesn't it?
And intentionality and all the things. My husband is a pastor, and so we take people through premarital counseling, right? Before he does a wedding. But I often think really when the counseling should come in should be after because everybody has the stars in their eyes and mostly people are believers. So they have that, Jesus fire and they do like Jesus is going to take us through everything. And man, if you have Jesus at the center, that is the very best way to start a marriage for sure.
It
But there's a
is.
whole lot of practical things to put in place in a marriage. And it would be great for anybody to come back around, sit together in the midst of a ballroom, look at each other, revisit some of the dreams that you had back then, and talk about, like you were saying, Alisa, where have the wheels fallen off of the dreams and how do we get back there? And how do we put these communication strategies in place, to even have you can have a better, look, I've been married 25 years. I think the next 25 can be even better, but
Yes.
it takes
Amen.
work and thought, right? And that's, I think, what you're encouraging people to do.
Yeah, it's exactly what we're encouraging them to do. It could go from, from thriving to even better or great to thriving. But the cool thing about this is you are right. What's built into a getaway at a Weekend to Remember conference this Weekend to Remember getaway is this opportunity to be with each other.
Mhm.
And it's built in conversation time that many of you just are desiring to have that you don't have the time, right? The kids, work, life takes over, and pretty soon you find yourself having a conversation that started back in 2024, and you're still trying to finish that, going, "Wait, hold on, we haven't finished November yet." And so it's this idea of saying, "All right, now
Mhm.
here's a chance. Listen, let's have each couple sit there and talk for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes throughout different parts of the conference. And then at night, they have a date night on Saturday night. We make them go out and write a love letter. And they get to do these wonderful things that they just have maybe dreamt about doing and have
Yeah.
never been able to do."
And I think one of the coolest things about it, what you were saying, Cece, uh, that not only premaritally do we need this kind of input, but right after you get married, we've had couples that have been married for 3 days at a conference, all the way up to married for 50,
Mm.
almost 60 years.
We talked to the couple that's
Yeah.
married for 3 days, like, "What are you doing here? Go on a honeymoon. Why are you in Kalamazoo on day 3? Go to Hawaii, for heaven's sakes." But nonetheless, we accept you anyway. But
We accept you. Yeah. But
Part
I
of me wants to sit by that couple though, and it's like, let some of that enthusiasm rub back off on me here
yeah,
facing my
Yes.
exactly.
26th year,
Let me take some of their energy. Yeah.
But I think
Uh,
one of the things that's so powerful about having
mm,
both ends of that spectrum and
mhm,
everything in between in terms of length of marriage is
mhm,
that those young couples get to see, first of all, you can be happily married for 50, 60 years. There is hope. Oh my
mhm,
gosh. And if they can do it, and if Jesus can do that in their marriage, because we
mhm.
share a lot about from our failures. And we're really real, really vulnerable and transparent.
Yeah, in fact, we call ourselves not marriage experts, but marriage
Experience.
experienced.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit different. We do
Mhm.
study this, it is research based.
Yeah.
But Alisa, you're saying we
Yeah.
share it from our kind of mess ups.
Yes. Well, the world, there's a statistic that we've all heard that the Christian marriages are just as broken as the world, and 50% of marriages end in divorce. And that's actually not true.
It's not true.
It's not true. And it's based on research that the government stopped collecting as part of the census process decades ago. And so what it was, back in the 70s, they stopped taking that information. And so they just extrapolated it
Mhm.
over what it would be today. And what they found is that, especially in terms of Christian marriages, when you hear that Christian marriages are just as bad, that 50% end in divorce, it's actually closer to about 28 to 30%. And that's really based on people who self identify as Christians. And so that could be somebody, I grew up in church, but we don't really go, but I'm still Christian. And, and so they give their answers to the surveys. But what they found is that couples who have regular routines of attending church together, of praying together, of reading their Bibles, and that they're really daily living out their faith, what you see is the divorce rate for those couples actually goes down to about 17 to 18%. And now that's still too high. But that's considerably different from 50%. And so to have couples, yes, actually hear that and come in to say, there is hope there is, and to see other couples who are actually living it out. And the time of divorce is no longer the 7-year itch. It's now down to about 2 to 3 years,
Really?
the average time in a marriage that a couple will get divorced. And so to have them come on that front end, to get hope, to get the skills on the front end, and to actually see other couples living it out and in community within the church, it brings so much hope, encouragement, and inspiration.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about this Lauren Daigle song, which is Thank God I Do. And she talks about, you're my safe place, you're my hideaway, you're my anchor, you're my saving grace, my constant, my steadiness, my shelter, my oxygen. I don't know who I'd be if I didn't know you. Thank God I do. You're my safe place, my hideaway, you're my anchor, my saving grace, you're my constant, my steadiness, you're my shelter, my oxygen. It's kind of like you're inviting people right there at the beginning, the 3 days. It's like, look at the other person, see each other as a safe place and an anchor and a shelter, and make your marriage that, and then face the world together. Your home is with each other, and then you go out there and face the world, right? You're just inviting people to reconnect in that space.
That's great, Ceci. I think what Lauren Daigle did here is she captured something that we try and get across to couples. We are created in God's image, and our marriage reflects the reality of the truth that God is in relationship with himself in the Trinity. And so when he talks about this notion of being, or when Lauren sings about this notion of, this is my safe place, this is where, I find my hope, I find my rest, that's best modeled in a marriage relationship when two people are connected with God, because it's like a triangle. The closer we are on the ends, on the very bottom of this triangle, to that point of God, the closer we are to God, then the closer we get towards each other, and the closer that we are to becoming safe and a place of refuge and a place of hope. And we get to see that at a weekend to remember getaway. We get to see that in the lives of other people and in community around us, and go, this is a safe place. This is where I can be myself with these other people here. I get to go do this. And I think that is where God is glorified, is when we mirror and reflect his image in the community and in the church.
We've actually had couples literally come up to us at the end of the conference and tell us, you know what, this was our last ditch effort. We have divorce papers sitting on the front seat of the car. We're about to sign them and turn them in, but we thought, let's try one more thing. And we are leaving this weekend. We are tearing up those divorce papers, because now we feel like we have hope. We feel like we have the tools put in place. We feel like we are reconnected individually and as a couple with God as our focus and as our center. And with his help, we can do this.
We had a couple that went to our church that was in that spot heading toward divorce. They went to one of the Weekend to Remember getaways, And I think it was 9 months later they had a baby. Their marriage was restored.
Oh my gosh.
And that was the weekend that they point to that really turned things around for them. And that was several years ago. But I mean, powerful, really, to hit people at every point in your marriage. And even if you're doing well, it's just a great reminder to get back to some of the basics, or maybe you'll have a spark plug of an idea for a new way to communicate, and you get into your same habits and patterns and things. And it's like a little spark plug. Oh, maybe we should try that. Or maybe I've got to look at myself here too.
That's it right there. It's that awesome. You know what else is cool about that, CC, is it's this little spark plug. It's this way to, and it's also the way to encourage a young couple with gifting them something like this, or your buddy, or saying to your friends, "Hey, let's all go together." Or somebody that that's newly married, or somebody and it's a great getaway to be able to do that and share it with other people too. Again, some people like to go alone, maybe anonymous,
Right.
but most of the time it's really fun to be able to do something like this and even give it away to others. That's kind of fun too.
And no matter how long you're married, you grow, you change as individuals. I am not that same 22-year-old young woman that Chris married. And he is not that same, well, you're still strapping. I was going to say strapping young man. But yeah, ooh, look at those guys. But, he's not the same 25-year-old that I married. And he's probably been married to 3 or 4 different versions of Alisa after 37 years.
Sure.
But we grow, life changes us, experience, crisis, trauma, successes, children, jobs, move, all those contribute to our developing and growing and changing in different ways. And one thing that's so inspiring as a speaker is to see those couples that have been married like you and Dave, 25, 30, 35 years, that have been 7 or 8 times to Weekend to Remembers, because it's like their regular oil change on the car, to do maintenance on the car. We all do that, right? You don't just fill up your car with oil one time and then you're good to go, but you do regular maintenance on that car so that it keeps working in proper order and it lasts a lifetime for you. And so marriage is the same way. So to see couples come back year after year, because even if you've been before, you're a different person.
What
Even
would
if
you
you've been,
yeah. What would you say is the biggest lie that the enemy tries to speak into marriages? Is it that you're alone in this? You're the only one? You're broken? Is it the what do you think it is?
Yeah, no, great question. It feels like, I think you hit it right there at the end, that the sense of isolation is probably the biggest, that you're the only one. Sometimes that's this very personal, emotional, appeal, like you should be shamed, embarrassed, guilty. You're not good enough. You'll never measure up, and it could be in a marriage in which there's a lot of criticism and a lot of contempt, right? When people start to experience some of these deeper issues that come into play, a partner is defensive or contemptuous or critiquing all the time. Well, we could sometimes respond in different ways, but one of those is by feeling a sense of worthlessness, a sense of guilt, a sense of I don't measure up anymore and I'm not any good. And that drives, I think, a lot of the enemy. He has a lot of, kind of leaping off points to attack us. And then there's the other one, where that idea of pride, or, and lack of humility. This will never happen to me. I've got the greatest marriage. And then it's also for others, it's that vulnerability, that inability to share deep emotions, right? That it's just hard for me to identify and recognize deep emotions and be able to share those with the partner that I'm supposed to. And I think the enemy stokes that fire by saying, "Oh, you can't really reveal that," or "Yeah, your heart, it's just too wicked, too messed up." And, I think what we all need to say, yeah, the heart is wicked and deceitful above all else. Who can understand it? But what the enemy does is he says, yeah, but yours is a special case. Yours is, you're just messed up.
Mm.
And I think what we end up
Mm.
doing, Cece, is we end up using those kinds of, voice or whatever that is, feeling, and he exploits. Maybe we had bad marriage, models. Maybe we just don't have anybody around that we can talk to, and he exploits that and starts to isolate people more and more and make them feel they're the only one. They don't measure up, and
Yeah, I think another one that really hits us hard in our culture today is also a sense of entitlement, in terms of, you know
yeah,
what, you're not making me happy anymore.
yeah,
Mm.
You don't make me happy. You're not meeting my needs. I deserve better. I
Mhm.
deserve to be loved. I deserve to be treated better. I deserve to be happy. And you're not doing that for me. So I
yeah,
think we just, we've grown apart. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. And
Mhm.
it's all focused on me, my needs, what I deserve. And that is not scriptural. That
Right.
perspective is not biblical. Now, we want to use wisdom in choosing wisely who we're going
Sure.
to marry. We want to marry people who are loving, who are kind, who are thoughtful, who are good listeners, who are self-sacrificing. But all too often, we forget that whole scripture of Philippians 2, 3, and 4, that don't be so focused on your own needs, your own vain conceit, but in humility, consider the
Consider
other
the
person
other
as
person.
more important.
Mhm.
Pay attention to their needs, seek their
Mhm.
best first.
Right.
And, and we forget that part. That's not what the world teaches us.
That's a
yeah.
biblical principle that people need to be reminded of, and it's so contrary to culture.
Yeah.
That's a
Really
huge
is.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gary
Mhm.
Thomas one time
Yeah.
put on the subtitle of his book, "What if marriages weren't designed to make us happy,
Right.
but to make
Right.
us holy?"
Holy.
I mean,
Mhm.
that's the whole idea of
Yeah.
Philippians 2, 3, and 4. And I've taught
Right.
Gary almost everything he knows. I know whatever. He's not going to
No big
admit it.
deal.
He's been on our podcast, whatever. I'm sure I gave him that line at some point. But what if marriages were designed to make us holy? And
Yeah.
that means it's a whole new kind of perspective for me, right? It's like, oh, wait a minute. This isn't about my happiness. I think, Lisa,
Mhm.
what you said about entitlement, more and more young couples, well, they just don't make me happy anymore, I'm moving on. We're in Hollywood. Man, I'll guarantee you their concept of marriage is about making me feel happy. And when that runs out,
Mhm.
and it's going to be on average 2 to 3 years now,
Mhm.
then they're going to say, might be the wrong one.
Yeah.
Got to find the next one.
I made a
I
mistake.
missed my calling. I missed that person
Yeah.
that we were made for
Yeah.
each
I
other.
married the wrong
And I
person.
got to go to the next one.
Yeah.
And so what we have to do, Cece, is remind
Mhm.
couples all of the time at these getaways
Yeah.
that,
Sure.
yeah, it is work. Yeah, it does take time.
Yeah.
But we have a model for how to do that. God's in
Yeah.
relationship with himself. He shows us how to do this, how to treat others wisely
and
and
we have
kindly.
and we have the power to do it, not only the desire, but we have the power to live out these principles of healthy Christ-centered relationships when you have the Holy Spirit
Mhm.
dwelling within you. That
Mhm.
Philippians 2:13 says God is at work in you, giving you the desire to do his will, which his desire is for us to be forgiving, to not be malicious, and to not be self-centered, to be forgiving, to be
Mm.
kind, to be gentle, to remain faithful to my vows.
Mhm.
Even when I'm tempted to, to give in to that temptation, where do I get that wherewithal to stay faithful, to stay true, to be kind, to live that sacrificial love and offer Chris that sacrificial love? Because oftentimes I don't want to.
Mhm.
But Philippians 2:13 says, God's working in me, giving me the desire
Mm.
to do those things, and then the power to do the things that please God and to live sacrificially, to love, to be giving, forgiving, self sacrificing. Those are the things that please Him. And He's promised, I will enable you to do it. You have my power at work in you. The question is this, Alisa: are you going to cooperate with my Holy Spirit.
Mm.
Because you have a choice in this and daily decision points throughout the day. How am I going to live this out? Lord, I don't want to do this. I don't feel like being forgiven. I'm hurt. I'm angry. That really wounded me.
Mm-hmm.
But he's saying, Lisa, I'm still calling you to forgive. I'm still calling you to be loving and to take the initiative and to reach out.
Mm-hmm.
And I will help you do that. Will you let me help you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's what you're going to walk away from the weekend to remember.
Yeah.
Being reminded of that, maybe learning that for the first time, and then understanding how you practically do that in a day-to-day, moment-by-moment situation of marriage.
And Cece, one last thing too. We're out here in California. We're going to be in Kalamazoo, and we're going to be in Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
and we get to see marriages of all stripes and spectrums out here, and we have a buddy that is married to a very famous Hollywood starlet's sister, and so he's always and you would know who this is. He's always over there at their house, and you would know all the people that are there. And you know what? They look at him. He's the only Christian in that room, him and his wife. And this wife's sister, again, being this well known, they all look at them and say, you guys are so, they just stare. You guys are so weird. When they hear they've been married 28 years over Thanksgiving, they just honestly look at them like they're aliens and go, wait a minute, 28 years with the same person? You've been married to the same person for 28 years, because none of them have developed
Right.
any sort of understanding what it takes, the work and the foundation and the effort to be in a relationship in which you do that type of self-reflection, that type of asking God to come in, give me the power, give me the strength. None of them have that. And we just wish they could use that. That's the foundation of these weekend to get away.
Because who wouldn't sign up for that? And who wouldn't sign up to be married to somebody like that?
Exactly.
Right?
And,
But seeking the Father's heart, seeking the Holy Spirit's help,
yep.
seeking to glorify Him, right? When
Isn't that
when
true?
you're working on that yourself, or your spouse is working on that, I mean,
Isn't that the truth?
that's revolutionary.
Yeah, that's
So then
exactly.
why do we look at stars and actors and
Yeah,
Hollywood, and why do
yeah,
we idolize them? I'd
yeah,
rather idolize someone that's been married 28 years, that's putting
yep,
in the work,
yep,
That's what and setting my expectations on who Jesus calls me to be, not on what the world says, you
that's
know.
right.
With all the money and all the fame,
Yep,
you'd give that up in a minute
Yeah.
to be able to come home, like that Lauren Daigle, again, that line, to the safe place, the anchor, which is God.
isn't that feel just kind of warm and awesome
Yes.
what she sings about? It's like, I want my home
I
to be a
love that.
place of refuge,
Mhm.
this idea of refuge that gives me not just hope from a dreary, weary, hard world out there, but it also turns that refuge into a place of light where other people kind of go, wait,
Yeah.
what's coming from there?
Yeah.
Well, what's that house like? What that marriage
Yeah.
like? And I
Yeah.
think that's what this guy gets to do in Hollywood. That's what other
Yeah.
people get to do when they come to these weekends, is all of a
Mhm.
sudden people start asking them, hey, was something different? I noticed you guys seem to have a little bit of a, pep in your step. You seem a little bit more joy. Is there something different? And a lot of couples reported that it just gave them this new spark to kind of share that light.
Yeah. And imagine the kids when that couple goes home and they are reconnected, renewed. And one of the things we love about the Weekend to Remember getaway content is that you also are going to hear the gospel message. You're going to hear a whole session about what it means to have a personal relationship with Jesus, and then how that relationship empowers us, like I was saying, to live out these principles.
Mhm.
And imagine somebody. Last summer, I think we were in Phoenix, Arizona for a conference. 1,200 people there. 37 people gave their lives to Christ at that conference. Over 600 people rededicated their lives and marriages to the Lord.
Mhm.
Now imagine those couples going home to those children, and imagine the difference it's going to make in the way they treat each other, in the way they parent, in the way they role model for those kids what marriage is meant to be. And that's where you start to see the generational change, because it's that trickle down theory, right? For the first time, these kids are really seeing what it means to, like we said, to love sacrificially, what it means to forgive, what it means to be humble and defer to the other person and take that initiative. Hey, let's do it your way first.
Right.
And then then we'll do my way, but let's do your way first. I think that's a great idea. And
Is that what could we wrap it up, so to speak? And I could talk to you guys both for hours and hours. It's such great stuff. Do you have a favorite piece of advice, or what do people kind of report to you as the most powerful thing that they've learned at one of these conferences?
Yeah, I think a lot of them come away with this idea, a new understanding of what oneness really means versus isolation, and how they're not alone. I think many of them also come away with recognizing, very practical, things as well, like sex. We have a whole session on, what sex, not necessarily is, but how it looks in your marriage. And I think many of them come away with a new appreciation. I think one of the things that we like to say, that kind of helps a little bit, is it's better to be understanding than it is to be understood. And what that means is, if a person needs to be understanding, but too many of us like, well, you don't understand. Hold on. You don't understand me. You're not getting what I say. And that skill that we take them through in listening is helping them to listen and hear what the other person's heart and emotions behind their words are. Yeah. And we say it's better to be understanding than it is to always be understood. And I think it's the similar thing. It's right. It's better to be interested than interesting. And so when your spouse is changing all the time, we tell them, hey, man, it's better to go out there and be curious about your spouse. Be curious about their day. You don't, just because you've been married 10 years doesn't mean they're the same person. They change, their dreams change, and they love hearing that. They're like, wow, you could become a detector, says John Gottman, a dream detector of your spouse. Go do it. Go figure out what they love, what makes them tick.
Do you know where this was highlighted to me this very week?
Yeah.
It came in the form of my 13-year-old nephew. And I'll tell you something that I observed. It was so powerful. My husband, Dave, we were just actually in Southern California, in San Diego last week, and he ran a 50-mile marathon. And he trained for it, and that's how he wanted to celebrate his 50th birthday, right? Running 50 miles. And and lots of people have asked him about it, and lots of people have applauded him for it and all of that. But my nephew comes over, he's 13 years old, and he says, Uncle Dave, tell me about the last mile of that race. Tell me about, you're in your last mile. What were you thinking, Uncle Dave? Were you in pain? Were you hurting? And I was like, wow, I had never encountered somebody being so interested in someone else, so cheering on their success. He didn't, my nephew is an amazing athlete, but he didn't make it about himself. Yeah. Right. And so many of us do that in relationships too. They springboard off that thing that you say, and then they make it about them. I do that. And I was like, I texted my sister. I was like, this kid is amazing, because he was cheering him on. He was proud of him. But he asked really good questions, and he made it about him. Ceci, and I was like, I want to be more like that.
I love that.
Ceci, your nephew's going places. He's already got it figured out, man.
Totally.
We were doing a conference one time. We speak at universities as well. We were at UC Berkeley. And at UC, I don't know if you have time for a story, but we're at UC Berkeley telling them about how to do relationships well. They invited us in. We didn't tell them, I'm a psychologist, and we talked about communication theory and psychology, and they liked it, it's Berkeley, but we weren't going to tell them we were Christians until the very end, because we didn't want the riot to happen at the beginning. Right. And so we told them at the very end, we're Christians and we have a biblical foundation, and the way we do relationships when things get hard, is based upon God's word. And okay, goodbye now. If you have questions, come up and see us, And they bolted up front and they had questions. First kid comes up, and no joke, he's Muslim. And he just says, Dr. Grace, I got a question for you about your talk. And I go, all right, man, bring it on. I'm ready for you, brother. And he says, yeah, I have a problem. I go, all right, let's go. And he says, I don't know how to talk to girls. And I said, oh, are you an engineering major? And he said, yeah, how did you know? And I said, oh, I don't know. It was just a wild guess, Berkeley and engineering. And then he said this, I said, well, I'll tell you what, it's hard to talk to girls when you're always trying to be interesting. I said, do this. It's better to be interested than interesting. And you should have seen his engineering brain catch this. He's like,
Yep.
wow,
Yeah.
wow,
Huh.
I could do that.
Light bulb.
And then he goes, I go, do you know anybody in this room? And he says, he looked around in this auditorium, 400 or 500 students filing out. And he goes, I know that girl. I said, why don't you go try it? I look up 20 minutes later, and he and her are still in conversation 20 minutes later. And I'd love to report that they're married today, but I don't know that,
Yeah, right.
But I will tell you, it's a principle like that. You asked this question, what do they get at this, getaway?
Mhm.
I think what they do is they get permission to be there, to be themselves, to have God work on them and on their issue. And I think they report back, we had the time to talk with each other was worth it. We had time to sit there and talk about something that we needed to talk about.
Yeah, we've heard them say, we had conversations this weekend that we've been needing to have for years.
Yeah.
And now they'll say, I feel like I have a new understanding of how I can love my wife or my husband better. And to hear them say, I've learned how to love it. I've learned something that I'm taking away that God has changed in me. It's just like, mwah, perfect. You got it. This is awesome.
I have some really good news for our listeners that there is a $100 coupon when you enter the code GETAWAY. And Abby's going to link that for everybody in the show notes at the end of this podcast, because I know that the conference is coming up this weekend at Van Andel. It is sold out. You will come around again, though. You will come around to this area again. But there's a conference coming up in Kalamazoo, April 4th through 6th. And then there's one in Chicago, April 4th, or at a different date. We'll get those linked in the show notes too.
They actually there's probably around 75 of these conferences all over the country throughout the year.
Yeah. So if you want to go to a destination one.
Yeah. Some great destinations, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, up in the mountains, or Destin, Florida, or Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. They're all over. So
you don't just have to, you can pick one you can drive through or drive to. You don't want to drive through.
Yeah, there are some drive-through ones. We haven't had any success with the drive-through.
We just throw the workbook
We're
at
like,
them.
well, you want fries with that? Then get it.
Maybe I've just invented your new kind of, modern culture marriage
There
conference.
you
It's
go.
a drive-through situation. It's kind of like TikTok, you just roll
Marriage in a
through
minute.
marriage in a minute. You guys, bless you. I am so thankful that you opened your mail, or your roommate opened your mail, Alisa, and found that letter from Chris all those years ago. Obviously, the Lord had a hand in that, because he is blessing marriages and families through you and your ministry. And, the many people that you encounter in your work as professors at Biola and other colleges too. Keep going. Keep faithfully putting one foot in front of the next. Your voices are so needed in our culture.
Thank you, Ceci.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate it. And like I said before we went on air, I was listening to your podcast, and I think I have a new favorite podcast.
Oh,
I really love it. You have a great style, great topics you're covering. Thank you for having us.
And now I'm going to lose my wife for 30 more minutes a day. So,
hey, we love that you're tuning in. Appreciate it. And we'll have you guys back, okay?
All right. Thanks, Ceci.
Thanks, Ceci.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to today's episode of This Lyric, That Truth. If you were inspired by today's conversation, feel free to share it with a friend and leave a 5-star review. If you're looking for more hope and encouragement in your music, download the Joy Media mobile app for free wherever you download your apps. I'm Ceci, and I so look forward to sharing more in-depth conversations with you as we talk about the lyrics that encourage us and shape our lives. Meet me back here next week for another episode of This Lyric, That Truth.